Hi folks, welcome to Sunday's edition of the iWrite Radio podcast, stroke videocast. Full house today. We've got Jimmy Hutton with us.
Good afternoon.
And Stuart Lockhead.
Hello there.
And I'm Norrie Stewart. We'll go with Marr, as that's Marr and Brewer, the only politics today. Mike Small's written an interesting piece, and Dani Garavelli's written an interesting piece. There's been one or two quite good pieces out today. And not Andrew Wilson, what's his name?
Brian Wilson.
Brian Wilson has also written a not typical piece for him, in as much as he seems to be trying to pretend he's defending Alex Salmond. We might mention that. But let's start with Marr. Stuart.
Yes, I saw Andrew Marr, most of it. I normally find it infuriating. I did shout at the telly. As soon as I switched over from Sky, I realised, whoa, who was he speaking to first? I don't know. Anyway, I had a...
Hancock, was it not?
It could have been. Anyway, I shouted at the TV right at the start, 9:10. And I don't know what the neighbours thought. However, I suppose the only interesting bit was when he spoke to Keir Starmer, because the rest of it we all know about. It's all about because the rest of it's all about we're all going to have this partial lockdown. The only thing I've got to ask about this tightening up the lockdowns in England is, have you noticed that they haven't had a local lockdown in the southeast of England yet?
Well, London's looking closest as far as I can gather.
Or London. Now, are they deliberately not testing around that area so they don't have to lock down London? Because lockdown London would be the hot potato, I suppose. So
yeah, because that's their country. London's their country.
Exactly. So that was my thought. That just had a go at Starmer. I mean, the thing that we discovered about Starmer is that he's backing the government on Brexit, backing the government on the pandemic, and he's sitting on the fence when it comes to Scottish and independence referendum.
Well, he's climbing over the fence and then sitting on it, isn't he? I mean, he's had all 3 points of view. Give them a referendum, don't give them a referendum, and I didn't want to commit either way.
Right. Basically, his new line today seems to be, no, we're going to fight this election on them not getting a referendum. If by any chance they were to win, we'll take another look at it, because it's still up to Westminster to decide these things, not those sweaty socks up north of the border.
One thing we didn't mention, which took up most of the paper review on Marr, is the £10,000 possible £10,000 fine if you don't obey lockdown. That starts at £1,000 and goes on a rising scale. People that are going to not lock down are people who can't afford to stay at home. Where do they think they're going to get £1,000?
It's farcical, mate. The worst thing about it is once they've rammed it up to 10 grand and people can't pay the initial grand, then what are they going to do? Are they going to jail them for not being locked down, for trying to feed their families?
And will the jails be full of people? Have the jails got space?
Or if you're a real cynic, they know their pals who want to party, their donors, etc., can afford £1,000 fine.
There isn't it? That is a point. I think it's worth bringing in at this point Brewer, because Jeane Freeman was asked the alternative question because she's the health secretary in Scotland about fines, and Brewer tried to trap her, but no chance. And she actually said, look, the situation in Scotland is you get a £30 fine or a £60 fine, fixed penalty. That's all you get in Scotland at the moment. A huge difference, isn't it? And Jeane Freeman was asked if they were going to go along with what was happening in England, and she said, look, we believe, basically, she said, we believe in the carrot, not the stick. And we want furlough to be extended so that people have got the money they don't have to break.
Which they haven't extended furlough, but they're making an offer of £500. Now, I don't know whether that's for 14 days or 7 days, but £500 to people who would struggle to stay at home and not.
I would imagine the people that are going to struggle won't be able to provide evidence that they need the money. Do you understand what I mean? They won't be able to provide the documentation.
Well, I think you might be right about that. I mean, I fully expect to see the poorest suffering as usual. well, because the Tories either don't understand, let's be kind and say they're ignorant of the realities of being poor, rather than that they're just nasty. God, I actually said that. Did you hear me say that out loud?
Did you keep a straight face while you were doing it?
But that was interesting, I thought, because Brewer just wanted yes, we're going to impose the same fine structure from her. Whereas, in fact, what she was saying is, we trust the Scottish people. And if you want people to trust you and you want them to obey you, the best way to do it is get them on side, not threaten them.
Aye, threats have never really been, they didn't really play well north of the border. But the idea that introducing a draconian fine structure is going to change anything is ludicrous, because it doesn't work. I mean, we talked about doing it instead of closing the border months ago. We talked about massive fines. That could have worked at that point, because the English were twitchy about coming to Scotland anyway. They don't understand the powers that the Scottish government has. They have no concept of what devolution actually means. But to threaten people that are breaking lockdown with £1,000 and possibly 10 grand is just stupid. But it plays to, it's red meat to the Tory right-wing press, so that's where it came about.
And I think it's indicative of the fact that what's important to Tories is money.
Mm-hmm.
You know, £1,000 dents their pocket. They understand. They can't understand £30 or £60 because that's what they pay for breakfast.
Coming a few days after the Prime Minister whinged that he couldn't get by on 150 grand a year, it's a bit rich though, isn't it?
Well.
And he can't afford to pay for the food living at number 10.
It's terrible. Apparently they're worried about childcare because they'll only be able to afford one nanny. Shouldn't he need a nanny right now? It's not that long been born. And frankly, one nanny ought to be enough for one child. But who knows? How on earth do you need 2 or 3 nannies for a wean, by the way? How does that come about?
24-hour covered, 7 days a week, mate.
I thought it was just that they needed a spare in case Boris got horny, mate.
Well, there's another story. Now we've gone personal. There's a lot of talk about apparently Gove's wife's friend's book. There's a lot of stuff coming out, and apparently Gove's wife has been she pushes him. Apparently she wears the trousers, and she's going to be the next prime minister. It's the next prime minister behind Gove. Gove officially become prime minister.
She's going to replace Dominic Cummings?
Who knows? Sarah Vine's her name, if you don't know.
She's definitely Mrs. Francis Urquhart.
Is that right? Nicely put, yeah. Better than me.
I've decided that the best analogy with the present Westminster government is a carry-on film. I thought maybe Carry On Up the Swanee. And I'm still playing with which actor would play which character.
I'll tell you what, mate, Michael Gove's just you in. You didn't need anybody, just go and exhume Charlie Hawtrey. He was absolutely perfect.
Absolutely perfect.
Yeah. But Boris has got to be Sid James, I think, with his leery, dirty innuendo.
Did they ever cover politics, the carry-ons?
They did. Really. They did Carry On Up the Khyber, where they were the British Rash.
They had the local politics for the one in the holiday resort with a beauty contest.
Yeah, aye. No, that's a movie that needs to be made, I feel.
Mm-hmm.
The other interesting thing about Brewer was the one question he didn't ask DRoss, Douglas Ross, was you're making an offer for free school meals at primary level, yet you voted against it for England.
Yeah, that was deliberate. Douglas Ross is not going to appear on the BBC if they're going to ask him hard questions, clearly, because that's the one question that you had to ask Douglas Ross today. How on earth can you expect to be taken seriously proposing free school dinners in Scotland, having voted against it in England? And the fact that they chose not to ask him it means he obviously ruled that out before agreeing to do the programme.
You're right there.
Well, and the other question, of course, he couldn't answer was, will you defend devolution? which was not the question asked, but that was the question, the way it should have been phrased.
Oh, I just realised that's why I shouted at the telly again. Chlorinated chicken came up again.
It was hilarious because I mean, we mentioned last week, you mentioned it about 15 times.
I know. God.
And right at the start, the very first question, you thought, no, don't go with chlorinated chicken. Go with anything but chlorinated chicken. Not chlorinated chicken.
So we've got, what we also discovered that tomorrow the Commons are in and they're going to discuss the internal market bill, and apparently there might be some amendments that Douglas Ross might have something to do with.
But the only thing in England, in Westminster anyway, that is worrying them about the internal market bill is the right to forgo international treaties. They're not discussing how it affects the devolved settlement.
Well, give Brewer his due. He did ask that. He got into that area, which I was surprised that he bothered.
Well, he didn't get an answer, that's for sure.
No.
They just want to, and because they've got the compliance of the Labour Party, because basically that's why Keir Starmer got the job. So the Labour Party, this can be seen as a time of stricture for the entire country. So the Labour Party are just going to rubber stamp anything that the Tories push through. But the bottom line, they didn't care about the devolved administrations. They're perfectly happy to, and frankly, Labour will go along with it, because having a devolved administration, having power in Wales has proven a noose around their neck. They are not as effective as the SNP are in Scotland, so the Tories can beat them with it and we can beat them with it. So they're happy to see the powers taken away from Cardiff as well as taken away from Edinburgh.
But it will be used. I mean, I think it will go through. I don't think there's any way to stop it. But it will be used to beat the SNP. And I'm pretty sure that there are going to be knock-on consequences for Barnett consequentials. In effect, Barnett consequentials will get spent by the UK government.
I think we should, long before they get to the point of actually enacting this and starting to use their powers, I think we should have called a referendum and told them to ram it.
I'm pretty sure that
I agree.
On the 1st of January, they'll start using it.
They'll not get it through the House of Lords that quick, mate. The House of Lords is going to hold this up for a while. And depending on just how strong the feeling is within the Conservatives in the House of Lords, it could be held up for some time.
Well, fingers crossed. Although not held up for the reason we want it held up.
No.
But held up nonetheless, yeah. Mm-hmm. Where are we going to go next? Dani Garavelli?
Our favourite little conspirator.
Wrote a piece in the Sunday Scotsman.
Oh yeah, the Scotland on Sunday. It was a very challenging front page, which I posted because, well, there you go, you couldn't ignore it. But inside the Scotland on Sunday, there was just another piece by Dani Garavelli. You guys can eat it up. I noticed that Stuart Campbell tore it apart and highlighted the lies in it again. And the headline was something about treacle. What did she call it? Inside the Salmond Inquiry is like wading through treacle. Her article was like treacle. It was just, it was just a rehash of what we already know, apart from telling lies about whether Salmond was keeping things secret.
Yeah, I thought she was maybe trying to reposition herself, mate. I think she's she doesn't want to be seen as the hatchet job. Her hatchet job and the hatchet jobs that she's done previously, she's now trying to soften the position there so that perhaps the Procurator Fiscal's office look the other way. I'm not so sure what's going on with this, but with the stuff that the Daily Record printed last week that she accuses, well, Kenny McCaskill leaked probably, but there's more to come apparently. Other people who are closer to this, have seen more of the WhatsApp group stuff. And for me, Peter Murrell's going to have to fall on his sword. He's going to have to resign his position as chief executive of the SNP because at the end of the day, what's already proven is that he has used WhatsApp and used the complainers against Alex Salmond to try and assassinate Salmond, to end his career. He's pushed for it. He's urged people to pressure the police. He's urged people to pressure the Procurator Fiscal's office. At that point, Alex Salmond was still a senior member of the SNP. So Peter Murrell's using his influence and possibly the influence of his missus, but we don't have any proof of that, to stab Alex Salmond in the front, back and the side. And the unfortunate thing for Mr. Murrell is it's all failed. At that point, he should maybe do the decent thing and fall on his sword, because if he doesn't, his missus could get dragged into this in a way that we, as people who want Scottish independence, do not want to see happening.
I'm sorry, I'd still want to see the whole thing. I want to see the whole message stream.
I think that'll come, mate. It's only a matter of time before that is.
Outrageous that anybody puts pressure on the police. That's just a laugh. That's, you know, moral heightened stuff.
Why is the chief executive of the SNP attempting to put pressure on the police?
Everybody attempts to put pressure on the police.
To jail a former First Minister. That's what they were looking at. If they won this case, Alex Salmond was going to jail. So why is he doing that? Why is he so bitter and angry against Alex?
Right. We're looking back here. If Alex Salmond had been found guilty and gone to jail, what would we have been saying?
That he was a pest and he
should have gone to jail.
Punished for what he done, but
he's been found innocent. He's been found innocent, but we knew less before the trial, I dare say, than Murrell, etc. I find it difficult to believe. Well, I know what's happening. They can't get Alex Salmond. They've done all the damage they can to him up to now. So they're going to go after the hierarchy of the SNP. Now, the hierarchy of the SNP might be guilty or innocent. We don't know. But my problem is putting pressure on the police to act because the timing was bad. We want this over and done with. The very things we're talking about, other people are talking about in terms of the next year's election. We don't know the context of that. Is it put pressure on the police to get a decision made, get it up to the Procurator Fiscal to make a decision? At no point does he say put pressure on until the second part where he's on about Salmond, attacking Salmond from all sides.
Look, one of the
that's the thing that really matters.
So why does Peter Murrell, as chief executive of the party, and presumably he's pretty well remunerated for that, why does he feel it's necessary to attack Alex Salmond from all sides? Why has he not got the balls to front him up and face him up and say, Alex, you've been a ball bag, resign for the party? But no, he's doing it all back. He's doing it all behind his back. He's been a wee snake about things.
At what point did Salmond resign?
Immediately.
He resigned after he was charged, mate. Didn't he?
Unless it came public, he made the move. Look, it's what we discovered from those WhatsApp messages is that the small possibility that what conspiracy there might have been was simply the civil service. Because what we've seen is that Peter Murrell was quite happy with what was going ahead. In fact, he wanted to press it so that he wasn't saying, oh, the civil service are out to get Salmond.
The stance of the SNP historically has been, you put a foot wrong and you're out. You make a comment on a text, an automatic texting message.
Neil Hanby.
You're out.
The McDonald guys from Aberdeen, Grouse Peter.
Right, that's the history. So is this about just let's get it over and done with, let's get it cleared up, get Alex out of the party and get it as far away from the party as we possibly can?
Well, that's the problem. Until we see the rest of it, we don't actually know. However, those who have seen the rest of it would indicate no. That's not. The rest of these WhatsApp messages are far more incriminating and show Mr. Murrell in an increasingly bad light. So hopefully Kenny McCaskill will get another tranche delivered to him that he can punt into the Daily Record or whatever unionist rag he chooses to use. But the bottom line here, I don't think that the chief executive of the party should be saying that a senior party member needs attacked from all sides. And he shouldn't be using an internal investigation of the Scottish government to do so.
Can I put it another way, Jimmy? He shouldn't be getting caught because that's exactly what politics is at party level.
Aye, that's very true, mate, but you're right. You shouldn't be getting caught. And when you do get caught, you hold your hand up and walk away. Alternatively, he sits it out.
I can't see him going.
Yeah, but look, the question of sitting it out, Jimmy, is worries me.
If he sits it out, he just does a Dominic Cummins and he turns every single piece of goodwill Nicola Sturgeon has gained through this pandemic by dealing with it well. If she stands by her husband, who is captured being a FUD and his bank of rights being a FUD, then frankly, she looks like a FUD for standing by him and all.
And the trouble is, we've got an election in May, and if, according to Alex Cole-Hamilton, is quoted by Garavelli in her article. He wants to hang. He doesn't. We are not in a hurry to get through this. We want to do it justice. That means they wanted to hang it about until the election, so it's still live at the election.
I think that shows you just how far Dani Garavelli has fallen. That the only person she can get to give her a couple of quotes is Alec Cole-Bobag, because he's a horse's ass.
What I found most interesting about it was she tried to ride two horses going in the opposite direction. She tried to maintain that he's a guilty man who got away with it stance, whilst being ultra fair. And this was only about process. Why did she speak to Alex Cole-Hamilton? The only man, sorry, him and Murdo, the only two that have attacked, have used it as a way to attack Alex Salmond.
Because clearly they're the only two people on the committee that actually are any use to her. Because they're peddling the line that she once peddled throughout this inquiry.
So, and this is actually what the inquiry is not supposed to be doing, which is retrying Alex Salmond. It's supposed to be examining where the civil service, the SNP and the Scottish government went wrong.
It just shows you how weak both the Conservatives and the Liberal Democrats are in Holyrood, that they allowed these two clowns to be on this committee. Because this is the first real investigative committee that the Scottish Parliament the first real big one that is set up. And right now, they're turning it into a clown show. And that reflects badly on Holyrood. Maybe it's deliberate. It reflects badly on Holyrood. It reflects badly on the nation. Because if there's a parliamentary inquiry, you want it to get to the truth. You want it to be serious. You know what I mean? You want it to actually have that gravitas.
There is an argument going that they're, you're right, that probably the first real inquiry that they've handled, and then they've got no experience, and they don't have the clerks to back them up. Now, whereas we normally see inquiries, say, in America or at Westminster.
That's just bullshit. They've had umpteen inquiries. This is the first one that could be a demolition job on the political party. It's the only difference. Every other inquiry they've had has had the people doing what they do.
Aye, virtually nothing. What decisions did they come to? Nothing serious.
That's kind of the point I'm making here, Jimmy. This is the only one that's going to hit the headlines. The papers aren't interested in inquiries into contaminated blood. No, they are interested in Alex Salmond getting his head on a plate again.
They were interested for years in the Scottish Parliamentary Committee into the building of the Scottish Parliament, and then they just shut up about it. They're interested
because they could attack the politicians who were in charge of it. You know, they're not interested in the reality of the dangerous things that can happen to ordinary members of the public. I mean, that was bullshit. And the other thing about Garavelli has got an into the alphabet women. Are they just not telling her what was in the WhatsApp messages they were sending around to each other?
I'm pretty sure Garavelli knows exactly what's in the WhatsApp messages. He doesn't necessarily want to refer to them, mate, because she's probably mentioned in some of them. Who knows? But
well, I mean,
the other thing, the
there
interesting thing
is
she also brought
complicit
in
this. The press.
Aye, well, she also brought into her article that the Alphabet women are still in discussions with this committee as to whether to appear in front of them. They might not bother.
There's only 2 of them, and they can't be forced in. I tell you what's interesting in the article. We know that Sue Ruddick, who is Chief Operating Officer of the SNP, she was the recipient of these leaked WhatsApp messages. Dani Garavelli deliberately says, doesn't mention her name. She deliberately keeps it secret. Now, why?
Presumably, she's one of Dani's sources, mate.
There you go. She says it mustn't be named or something. But she deliberately doesn't mention this woman's name. Claims that it shouldn't be mentioned.
That one of the upshots of this is the difficulty with keeping people anonymous who don't simply walk away after a court result. This has got ramifications for the future. I can see situations where witnesses who want to remain anonymous have to basically promise to keep their mouth shut, because all this innuendo that's floating about based on talking to the Alphabet women totally undermines the justice system.
Well, that's the big problem, that our justice system is under attack, and yet where's the defence of that from Dani Garavelli? She's too close to it to give any defence, and she's too close to attack it.
I'm not so sure it warrants defending, given the actions of the Lord Advocate of late. James Wolffe has brought the entire Scottish justice system into disrepute and has no intention of resigning. So,
is he a member of the Royal Orange Lodge?
There's every chance, mate. There's every chance that he's either. I'd suggest he's more liable to be a Mason than an Orangeman, but he could be both.
Is he not related to Willie Wolffe? He throws into the pot with absolutely no justification at all, I have to say.
Yeah.
I believe his nickname's Big Bad.
I suppose the piece we have to finish on is Mike Small's piece for the National.
Yes, he's been listening to our podcasts, obviously, because he covers most of the material that we covered all this week, including Neil Asherson.
Mm-hmm.
The Neil Asherson article is so broad and fundamental that I even shared it with my brother, who's a unionist. And Neil Asherson, when you go and examine this guy, this is a serious senior Scottish journalist, born in 1932. He served in Malaya. He went to Eton. He won a scholarship to Eton. He went to Cambridge University, and at Cambridge University, he was a member of the Apostles, which is the elite group of clever bastards. Even John Maynard Keynes used to run it when he was alive.
Sounds like he's got Vladimir Putin's phone number, mate, and probably had a sore sphincter back in the day.
Could possibly, but he came out. He is in favour of Scottish independence, but Mike Small sews that together with a guy called Philip Pindit Sewell or something. I forget all the names. What is the argument? The argument it adds up to the world has changed. It's changing under our feet, and the whole case for independence has changed, as we know. So it's really just saying.
Well, essentially, his argument is that the No campaign couldn't work because everything they claimed has been shot down in flames over the last 6 years.
Or you could say everything that the pro-Indy campaign said prior to 2014 has been shown to be true in the last 6 years.
Has come to pass.
Mm.
But he's using that as a justification for fighting the next referendum in a different way.
I think certainly whatever version of Better Together they cobble up will have to fight the campaign in a different way, because like we say, they've not got any argument. Their argument that you're voting to maintain the status quo. Well, what status quo?
Yeah,
An extreme right-wing English nationalist government holding court over Scotland for as long as we care to allow them to.
And when
I
you
don't think that would win over 50% of support in
and
Scotland.
when you walk in to vote, all the nervous people, it's about risk. And, you know, the last time there was a referendum, all the nervous people said, oh, I'm not going to, it's too big a change. Now people looking at what's happening in London and think, God almighty.
It is arguable that independence will look more like the status quo.
There you
with
go,
the
that's another way
changes.
to put it.
It's going to be of not any help at all. The number of articles this week that we've swapped between us referring to the UK as England's UK. I mean, I can't remember. I think it was maybe something in the Times, possibly the Guardian, but I think it was the Times, saying effectively that the new integrated market bill is basically saying England rules.
Yeah.
Whatever England goes for, everybody else has to accept.
It's surprising that quite so much of the London metropolitan commentariat are willing to put that in print.
And
it would tend to suggest to me that they will struggle to get that through.
But there's even a case again for the Tories to be saying, we'd be better off without Scotland.
They're never going to say that. They can't.
The unfortunate thing is the only people that write that or say that are the ones that don't have access to the numbers.
Well, I think the Tory party actually overestimates the damage that Scotland becoming independent would do to it in England. I don't think it'll look like much of a bump. I really can't see it, because if Scotland does get independence and become more progressive, that's not going to look good to Tories. That's going to look bad to Tories.
It didn't do them any harm 100 years ago when they lost Ireland. They still won the next election, didn't they?
Yeah, but look at the elections and the recent elections. They've attacked the Labour Party for being in the pocket of the SNP. They'd be glad to get rid of the SNP.
No, the Tories winning. That attack's worked, hasn't it?
Oh yeah, sorry, yeah, okay. That's not quite how I put it. I didn't put it very well.
I don't know. I do feel in my water that there's been a bit of a sea change, not up here in the papers. There's been a couple of things, the Brian Wilson piece, where he tried to be even-handed but failed in the last line today. I just feel that there is a kind of sea change, but especially down south. You know, they've kind of accepted that Scotland's going to go.
But they themselves are looking at how they are being treated. They, the press, are being absolutely messed around completely by Cummings and his wee project in Downing Street. They're not getting the access that they want. They're not getting the tidbits that they want. Frankly, they have been told what is happening, like the rest of the country, and they've just to go along with it. Well, and they didn't like that.
Well, there was news this morning that some Tories are not happy about the use of the emergency powers, and they want things to be done through Parliament, not these last-minute rule of six, half an hour before they come into force at midnight.
Yeah, but effectively what they're not happy about is that the economy is not getting priority over health. That's the problem from the view I look at it anyway.
No, that's fair enough.
So, you know, they might be arguing with the government, but what they're saying is you're not being big enough fascists, lads. So we want our 80% majority to force you into making sure old people die, young people get back to work and make us profits.
Don't go down eugenics. It's interesting that the Scottish Director of Message Matters, Scottish Tories, Andy McIver, Director of Message Matters, has written a piece, and he said that the only chance that the Tories have got to win a referendum is to bring it to support federalism the UK. And how on earth is that going to work?
This was yesterday's piece.
Andy McIver. There's only one way unionists
Aye.
can stop independence.
How in the hell do they think they're going to use the F word and get away with it yet again? And by the way, if it doesn't work for Labour and it's their policy, it sure as hell isn't going to work for Tories. Is Andy McIver just trying to keep himself in a job? Because that
I
suggests
quite like Andy McIver's writing. I think he's quite a good analyst, and I think he's right. The union is not a good enough offering. They're going to have to come up with something. But this time, I actually believe that the question will be asked. Put it on the table, make it law, and we'll believe you. If you don't do that, you're just going to do what you did last time.
At the end of the day,
Make a promise and not keep it.
you look, what we discovered with this offer to break international law over the internal market bill is that there is no treaty within the Westminster system that you can trust.
No, you can't trust them. It's that simple.
Right,
And they're
Tories.
making it very easy for any offer they make to be refused simply by saying, how can we trust them? They made promises to the DUP. They made promises to the EU, all of which have been broken. So why should promises to Scotland be any different?
Many times have they promised us crap in the past and reneged on it. I mean, right now we're meant to be sitting discussing the most powerful devolved parliament on the planet.
And
There are states in Germany that have far more control over their separate statehood than we as a nation have.
with one hand dangling federalism and with the other hand pulling the guts out of a devolution settlement that's 20 years old.
That's only 2 decades old.
No, there will always be diehard unionists that it won't matter. They just don't want to be independent. Let's put that another way, Norrie. They just want to remain dependent.
Aye.
That will always be the case. But
Well, being dependent has been very profitable for a certain sector of Scottish society. Come on, I mean, the folk that had power have still got power. The folk that had land 300 years ago have still got land. They've still got influence. Being part of the union has been very useful for a certain sector of Scottish society. Unfortunately, not for the rest of us. And that sector of Scottish society no longer has the wherewithal to keep us in check.
Yeah, do you know what one of the conclusions of this area of discussion coming up from London is that the working class in England need to waken up.
The working class in England doesn't exist anymore. They all want to be middle class.
I would worry about an element of the working class in England waking up. It's bad enough when they turn over and end up maskless in Trafalgar Square shouting abuse at coloured people.
Did you see the row about British Empire medals? You know, there was a row the other week about Land of Hope and Glory, or was it Rule Britannia, whatever it was, singing that. Now there's another row about the honour system, simply because it mentions the empire, which is now a dirty word.
Well, I have to say it troubles me not at all. They offered me a medal. I don't care what it's called. They can have it. Ram it.
Mm-hmm. Well, you should take it and sharpen the edges a wee bit first and then send it back before they ram it, mate.
And throw it onto the Tory benches in the Commons.
Mm.
Anything else, guys? Because we're kind of running near time.
Not for me.
No.
I need to go back to work.
Okay, working on a Sunday, Jimmy.
Aye, well, needs must, mate.
Okay, guys, thanks very much. Stuart Lockhead.
Hello.
And Jimmy Hutton.
Cheers.
I'm Norrie Stewart. Thanks for listening, folks, and we'll catch up with you tomorrow, when no doubt we'll all be totally locked down, solitary confinement for everybody.
Aye, well, we'll see what their next tranche of regulations brings.
Don't stick your head out the window, it'll cost you $1,000. Cheers for now.
I'd need a big window.
Cheers for now, folks.